Picture this: a dimly lit chamber, the flicker of candlelight casting long shadows across stone walls. Hooded figures whisper in hushed tones, their words lost to time, but their influence echoing through centuries. This isn't just a scene from a Gothic novel. It's the hidden world of medieval secret societies, where power, knowledge, and ambition intertwined behind closed doors. These weren't just gatherings of the curious or the paranoid. They were networks that shaped kingdoms, challenged the church, and left behind a legacy of mystery that still captivates us today. What really happened in those secret meetings? Who held the keys to these clandestine circles? And what truths or lies were they guarding? From the shadowy corners of medieval Europe, secret societies emerged as forces of intrigue and influence. Some sought to preserve ancient wisdom, while others plotted to overthrow the powerful. They operated in the margins of history, their stories woven into the fabric of religion, politics, and even art. Think of the Knights Templar, their sudden rise and dramatic fall shrouded in conspiracy, or the enigmatic Rosicrucians, whose cryptic manifestos teased at esoteric knowledge. These weren't just clubs for the elite, they were catalysts for change, operating in a world where speaking the wrong truth could mean exile or worse. And yet, their ideas refused to die, simmering beneath the surface of history until they resurfaced in revolutions, rebellions, and even modern myths. Why do these secret societies still grip our imagination? Perhaps it's the thrill of the unknown. The idea that history isn't just what's written in textbooks, but what was whispered in the dark. Or maybe it's the unsettling realization that the past wasn't always governed by kings and laws, but by hidden hands pulling strings from the shadows. Today, we're going to step into that world, peeling back the layers of myth and legend to uncover the real stories of these medieval enigmas. You'll discover how they shaped the world we live in, why their symbols still haunt our culture, and what truths might still be waiting to be found. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's an exploration of the secrets that refuse to stay buried. So, are you ready to follow the trail of the whispers? Long before the secret societies of the Middle Ages took shape, the seeds were sown in the twilight of the Roman Empire. Picture the underground meeting places of early Christian heretics, groups like the Gnostics, who whispered of hidden gospels and a spiritual knowledge the church refused to acknowledge. These were the first sparks of dissent, the quiet defiance that would later flare into full-blown secret movements. But it wasn't just rebellious Christians shaping this hidden world. Pagan traditions, clinging to life in the shadows of a Christianizing Europe, found refuge in secret rites and coded symbols. The old gods might have been banished from public worship, but their influence lingered in the whispered incantations of rural healers and the midnight gatherings of those who refused to let ancient wisdom die. Then came the political turmoil, the crumbling of empires, the rise of feudalism, and the constant struggle for power. In this chaotic landscape, secret societies became more than just keepers of forbidden knowledge. They became tools of resistance. The Cathars of southern France, for example, didn't just challenge church doctrine, they built an entire counterculture, one that threatened the very foundations of medieval authority. Their underground networks spread like roots beneath the surface until the church launched a brutal crusade to wipe them out. Yet even in their destruction, the Cathars left behind a legacy of defiance, proving that ideas whispered in secret could shake the pillars of the world. What made these groups so dangerous wasn't just their beliefs, it was their structure. Unlike the rigid hierarchy of the church, many of these societies operated as brotherhoods of equals, bound by oath rather than doctrine. They took inspiration from the mystery cults of ancient Rome, where initiates underwent elaborate rituals to unlock esoteric truths. But in medieval Europe, these secrets weren't just about spiritual enlightenment, they were about survival. To belong to one of these groups was to hold a forbidden key, whether it was alchemical knowledge, political strategy, or the simple act of solidarity in a world that punished free thought. The Church, of course, saw them as threats, but in their shadows something remarkable was happening. These societies became the keepers of what the establishment refused to preserve: the dissenting voices, the lost sciences, the suppressed histories. They were the dark mirror of medieval Europe, reflecting back everything the powerful tried to bury. And though many of their names have faded, their influence didn't. The questions they raised, the boundaries they crossed, those echoes never truly died. They just waited, hidden, for the next chapter of history to uncover them. Among the most legendary of these secret societies, none captured the medieval imagination quite like the Knights Templar. Born in the fires of the Crusades, they began in the early 12th century as a small band of warrior monks sworn to protect Christian pilgrims traveling to Jerusalem. But what started as a holy mission quickly transformed into something far more complex, a fusion of military might and financial ingenuity that would make them one of the most powerful organizations of their time. Their rise was meteoric. Clad in their iconic white mantles adorned with the Red Cross, the Templars became the elite fighting force of the Christian world. They weren't just soldiers, they were disciplined, fearless, and bound by an unbreakable code. Imagine knights who took vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, yet wielded swords with unmatched precision on the battlefield. Their reputation grew so formidable that entire armies hesitated before facing them. But their true power didn't just lie in their combat skills, it was in their mind. While their swords defended the Holy Lands, their innovations reshaped Europe's economy. The Templars invented an early form of banking so advanced it would seem like magic to most medieval Europeans. Pilgrims could deposit funds at one Templar outpost and withdraw them thousands of miles away using letters of credit, a system that eliminated the risk of carrying gold through bandit-infested roads. Kings and merchants alike relied on their financial networks, making the Templars indispensable to the powerful. Their vaults brimmed not just with coins but with influence as they financed wars, brokered treaties, and quietly amassed wealth that rivaled kingdoms. Yet with great power came great suspicion. Whispers swirled about what they guarded in their secret chambers, lost relics like the Holy Grail or the Ark of the Covenant, said to be hidden beneath their fortresses. Some claimed they possessed forbidden knowledge dug from beneath Jerusalem's ruins. Others accused them of occult rituals conducted under the cover of night. The truth may never be fully known, but one thing is certain: their wealth and secrecy made them targets. By the early 14th century, their downfall was as swift as their rise. King Philip IV of France, drowning in debt to the Templars, orchestrated their destruction. On Friday, the 13th of October 1307, hundreds of knights were arrested in a single night, their lands seized, their leaders burned at the stake after grotesque trials. But even in their demise, they left riddles unanswered. Did some escape with their treasures? Did their secrets survive in whispers passed among new societies? The Templars may have vanished from the official records, but their legend never did. The fall of the Knights Templar reads like a medieval thriller, a tale of betrayal, greed, and one king's desperation to rid himself of a debt he could never repay. Philip IV of France, nicknamed the Fair for his looks but not his morals, had emptied his treasury waging wars and buying influence. The Templars, with their vast wealth and network of financial power, were both his lifeline and his greatest vulnerability. He owed them staggering sums, and rather than face financial ruin, he chose a darker path: annihilation. The charges he concocted were as outrageous as they were effective. Heresy, idol worship, even spitting on the cross, these accusations were designed to shock and outrage medieval Europe. But here's the twist: Philip didn't act alone. He pressured Pope Clement V, a weakened pontiff who relied on French support, to condemn the Templars. Together, they turned the order's secrecy against them, spinning their private rituals into proof of devilish corruption. The truth was far simpler. This wasn't about religion, it was about silencing creditors and seizing fortunes. Then came the hammer blow, Friday the 13th of October, 1307. Before dawn, royal agents struck across France, arresting hundreds of Templars in a single coordinated sweep. The date was so infamous it birthed the superstition we still whisper about today. The knights, caught off guard, were tortured into confessing to crimes they didn't commit. Their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, endured years of imprisonment before being burned at the stake, his final curse allegedly haunting both Philip and Clement to their graves. But did the Templars truly vanish? Legends insist survivors fled with relics and treasure, seeding new secret societies from Scotland to Portugal. Some claim their knowledge lived on in the Freemasons or inspired tales of hidden grails. Historians, though, paint a grimmer picture. The order's wealth was pillaged, its members scattered or executed. What endures isn't a secret lineage, it's the chilling lesson of how easily power can rewrite truth, turning heroes into heretics with the stroke of a pen. The Templars' real legacy isn't buried treasure, it's the warning etched into their ashes. Even the mightiest can fall when kings and popes decide they must. But if the Templars' flame was extinguished in France, where did their legacy truly go? One compelling theory wins its way through the stone corridors of medieval cathedrals, where master masons carved more than just arches, they crafted a hidden language in their work. These skilled artisans, organized into powerful guilds, held secrets of geometry and architecture that seemed almost divine to the uninitiated. And some believe these very guilds became the keepers of Templar knowledge, safeguarding it in plain sight through symbolism etched into the stones of Europe's greatest churches. Take the soaring vaults of Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland, its pillars twined with carvings that mirror Templar iconography, floral motifs echoing the seal of Solomon, arches arranged in sacred geometric patterns. The chapel's construction began just decades after the Templars' dissolution, fueling speculation that fleeing knights found refuge among the Masons, blending their esoteric traditions with the builder's craft. Even the guild's initiation rites bear striking parallels, the symbolic death and rebirth of apprentices mirroring the Templars' own rituals of passage. Yet the connection runs deeper than just imagery. Medieval stonemason guilds were among the few groups allowed to travel freely across borders, their skills in such demand that kings and bishops granted them extraordinary privileges. This mobility made them perfect conduits for underground knowledge. Their lodges became repositories not just of architectural techniques, but of forbidden philosophies passed down through coded gestures and symbolic tools. The compass and square weren't merely instruments, they represented cosmic balance, the same duality the Templars explored in their most secret teachings. By the late Middle Ages, these guilds began evolving into something new. As cathedral building waned, their focus shifted from physical stone to moral and intellectual construction, the speculative masonry that would birth modern Freemasonry. The rituals grew more elaborate, layered with allegories of King Solomon's Temple, a theme deeply tied to Templar lore. Some even claim the Masons' famed lost word ritual preserves a fragment of Templar liturgy, a whisper of their true mission. Whether these links are historical fact or romantic conjecture, one thing is undeniable. The stonemasons became the new guardians of secrecy in a world still hostile to unorthodox ideas. Their legacy, like the Templars, proves how easily knowledge can hide in the open, written not in books, but in the very bones of the buildings we walk past every day. While the Templars left behind castles and ledgers, another secret society wove its legacy through ink and alchemical symbols, the Rosicrucians. Unlike the warrior monks of old, these were scholars and seekers, blending the budding sciences of the Renaissance with ancient mystical traditions. Their origins are murkier than candle smoke, with some tracing their roots to a shadowy 15th century figure named Christian Rosicrucians, said to have traveled the Middle East gathering esoteric knowledge before founding a secret brotherhood in Germany. Whether Rosicrucians was real or a myth, his name became the banner for a movement that would ignite Europe's intellectual powder keg. What set the Rosicrucians apart was their audacious fusion of opposites: medicine and magic, mathematics and mysticism. In an age when the Church still eyed scientific inquiry with suspicion, they dared to proclaim that spiritual enlightenment and natural philosophy were two sides of the same coin. Their laboratories bubbled with alchemical experiments, not just to turn lead into gold, but to uncover the divine principles hidden in nature itself. Think of the famed Emerald Tablet of Hermes, its cryptic maxim, "As above, so below," becoming a Rosicrucian mantra. To them, the universe was a vast, interconnected puzzle, and every experiment brought them closer to solving it. Then came the spark that lit the fuse: the Rosicrucian manifestos, published in the early 17th century. These documents, like the Fama Fraternitatis, read like intellectual wildfire. They announced the existence of an invisible college of enlightened adepts working to transform society through hidden knowledge. The reaction was electric. Scholars, nobles, and even kings scrambled to uncover the truth behind these mysterious texts. Were the Rosicrucians real, or was this an elaborate hoax designed to provoke? Either way, the manifestos tapped into a deep hunger for change, arriving just as Europe teetered on the brink of the Enlightenment. The fallout was immediate and far-reaching. Some saw the Rosicrucians as dangerous heretics, others hailed them as prophets of a new age. The movement's ideas seeped into the foundations of modern science. Figures like Isaac Newton, himself an avid alchemist, may have been influenced by their blend of rigorous study and spiritual pursuit. Even today, their fingerprints linger in the rituals of fraternal orders and the persistent human quest to marry reason with wonder. The Rosicrucians may have shrouded themselves in secrecy, but their true legacy lies in the enduring tension between what we can prove and what we dare to imagine. Deep in the sun-baked hills of southern France, an underground movement was rewriting the rules of medieval faith, not in Latin from cathedral pulpits, but in the everyday language of the people. The Cathars weren't just heretics to the Church, they were revolutionaries living a radical truth. Their world was split in two, not between heaven and hell as the Church taught, but between matter and spirit. To them, the physical world was a prison crafted by a false god, a realm of suffering from which the soul had to break free. This wasn't just theology, it was a direct challenge to every power structure in Christendom. Their strongholds, like the jagged fortress of Montségur perched high in the Pyrenees, became symbols of defiance. These weren't just castles, they were sanctuaries where Cathar perfects, their spiritual elite, lived lives of extreme austerity, refusing meat, marriage, and wealth. Ordinary believers, the credents, supported them, weaving a secret network of safe houses and mountain paths. The Church called them the Albigensian heresy, but to the people of Languedoc they were the bons hommes, the good men, who offered something Rome couldn't, a faith without gold-clad priests or elaborate rituals, where salvation came through knowledge, not sacraments. Then came the crackdown. In 1209, Pope Innocent III launched the Albigensian Crusade, the only holy war ever waged against fellow Christians. What followed wasn't just a military campaign, it was annihilation. At Béziers, when crusaders asked how to distinguish Cathars from loyal Catholics, the papal legate reportedly snarled, "Kill them all." God will know his own. Thousands were slaughtered, their bodies left to rot in the sun. The siege of Montségur in 1244 became their last stand. After months of starvation, over 200 perfects walked willingly into the flames rather than renounce their beliefs. But legends persist that not all was lost. On the night before Montségur fell, 4 Cathars allegedly slipped through enemy lines carrying something precious, perhaps sacred texts, a trove of gold, or even the Holy Grail itself. To this day, treasure hunters scour the mountains, decoding clues in carvings and folklore. Whether the treasure was material or spiritual, one truth remains: the Cathar's defiance echoes through history, a testament to the terrifying cost of dissent and the unkillable nature of ideas. In the bustling market towns of medieval Europe, where the church's authority loomed large, a quiet revolution was taking shape, one led not by armored knights or robed clergy, but by women with baskets of bread and hands calloused from work. The Beguines were unlike any religious order the world had seen. They wore simple grey dresses, not nuns' habits. They lived in communal houses called beguinages, not cloistered convents. Most radical of all, they took no permanent vows, answering to no pope or bishop. These laywomen created their own spiritual path, one that wove prayer with practicality in a world that demanded women choose between marriage and monasticism. What made the Beguines so dangerous wasn't their piety, it was their independence. In cities like Bruges and Cologne, their beguinages became islands of female autonomy, where widows, unmarried women, and even runaway wives could earn their keep as weavers, teachers, and healers while pursuing mystical devotion. They recited prayers in the vernacular rather than Latin, making spirituality accessible to ordinary people. Some, like the famed mystic Hadewich of Antwerp, wrote ecstatic poetry comparing divine love to a tempest that shatters the soul's foundations. Such intimate expressions of faith bypassed priests altogether, threatening the church's monopoly on salvation. The movement's male counterparts, the Beguines, faced even harsher scrutiny. These itinerant craftsmen and laborers blended manual work with apocalyptic preaching, their ragged robes marking them as spiritual outsiders. Unlike monks safely tucked behind abbey walls, Beguines moved through crowded streets, their sermons dripping with critiques of clerical corruption. When famine or plague struck, their warnings about the end times found eager ears among the desperate poor, a powder keg for social unrest. By the 14th century, the backlash came swiftly. Church councils condemned Beguines as fake nuns and accused Beguines of harboring the free spirit heresy, the belief that one could become so united with God that moral laws no longer applied. In reality, most sought only to live simply, sharing meals with the poor and nursing the sick during outbreaks. But in a rigid hierarchy, flexibility looked like rebellion. Their crime wasn't heresy, it was creating a third way between altar and hearth, proving spirituality didn't require institutional permission, yet their legacy proved unshakable. The Beguines' blend of action and contemplation inspired later mystics like Teresa of Avila, while their beguinages evolved into some of Europe's first women-run hospitals and schools. Today, their story resonates as a testament to how ordinary people can remake religion from the ground up, not with grand decrees, but with looms, ladles, and the courage to redefine sacred space. High in the Alborz mountains of Persia, where jagged peaks scrape the sky like nature's own fortress walls, a secret brotherhood mastered the art of fear. The Hashashin, known to Europe as the assassins, weren't just killers. They were architects of terror, wielding daggers and whispers with equal precision. Their name, often tied to the Arabic word for hashish users, is likely a smear campaign by their enemies, but their reputation was anything but a hallucination. For nearly 2 centuries, these shadow warriors held kings and caliphs hostage to a single chilling idea: no one was beyond their reach. Their stronghold at Alamat, a fortress clinging to cliffs like an eagle's nest, became the stuff of nightmares. Imagine a place accessible only by secret paths, where initiates trained not just in combat, but in languages, disguise, and the slow art of infiltration. The Hashashin didn't rely on brute force, they struck with surgical precision, often in broad daylight, leaving their signature dagger plunged into a target's chest as a message to all who might oppose them. But their true weapon wasn't steel, it was psychology. Before a kill, they'd sometimes let their target see them for days, a ghostly presence at the edge of vision, just to savor the paralyzing dread. Then there are Marco Polo's tales, colorful but riddled with myth. He claimed young recruits were drugged with hashish and taken to a hidden garden of earthly delights, tricked into believing it was paradise. Awakening back at Alamat, they were promised eternal bliss if they obeyed. It's a gripping story, but historians dismiss it as Orientalist fantasy. The truth is far more fascinating. The Hashishans' power came not from drugs, but from fanatical loyalty and a web of spies stretching from Syria to the edges of Mongolia. Their Grand Master, the enigmatic Old Man of the Mountain, didn't need illusions. He wielded something sharper, the absolute devotion of men who believed their cause was divine. What made them truly unique was their economy of violence. Unlike armies that ravaged whole regions, the Hashishin rarely killed more than necessary. A single assassination could topple a regime or halt an invasion, saving countless lives on both sides. They weren't mindless fanatics, they were strategic players in the chessboard of medieval geopolitics, manipulating crusaders and sultans alike. When the Mongol warlord Hulagu Khan finally crushed Alamat in 1256, it wasn't just a military defeat, it was the end of an era. Yet their legend endured, morphing into whispers of ninja-like stealth in the East and later inspiring fictional brotherhoods in our pop culture. The Hashishin proved that sometimes the deadliest weapon isn't an army, it's the unshakable belief that death could be waiting in any crowd at any moment. Beneath the gilded banners of medieval Europe, where chivalric orders pledged fealty to kings and Christ, one brotherhood wore a symbol that sent shivers down spines, the Order of the Dragon. Founded in 1408 by Sigismund of Luxembourg, King of Hungary, this elite alliance of knights wasn't just another noble fraternity. Their emblem, a coiled dragon, its tail wrapped around its own neck like a noose, wings spread as if ready to strike. To the uninitiated, it might seem like mere heraldry. But to those who knew its secrets, this was the mark of a brotherhood sworn to defend Christianity from its enemies, both earthly and perhaps something darker. Enter Vlad III, Prince of Wallachia, better known to history as Vlad the Impaler. Inducted into the order as a young man, he adopted its dragon insignia with zeal, earning the moniker Dracula, meaning son of the dragon. But while the order's founders envisioned crusading knights, Vlad's interpretation of their mission took a far grimmer turn. His brutal campaigns against Ottoman invaders, notorious for leaving forests of impaled victims, blurred the line between defender and monster. The dragon symbol, once a mark of holy defiance, began to twist in the public imagination, morphing into something more sinister, like a shadow creeping across a castle wall. Centuries later, Bram Stoker would pluck these threads from history's tapestry to weave his masterpiece, Dracula. The novel's villain, though fictional, drips with echoes of Vlad's legacy and the Order's serpentine imagery. Stoker's Count isn't just a blood-drinking aristocrat. He's a shapeshifter who commands wolves and slithers down walls like the very dragon Vlad once bore on his crest. Even the name Dracula bridges fact and fiction, a deliberate nod to the historical figure whose reputation straddled the line between hero and horror. But here's the twist: the Order of the Dragon's true purpose was far from vampiric. Its members, including Holy Roman emperors and Balkan princes, saw themselves as warriors of light, their dragon symbolizing the defeat of chaos, a motif borrowed from Revelation's Archangel Michael crushing Satan beneath his feet. Yet history has a way of warping symbols. Just as the dragon could represent divine order, it could also evoke the serpent in Eden, the ancient embodiment of evil. This duality made it the perfect vessel for Stoker's myth-making, transforming a medieval brotherhood's badge of honor into the stuff of nightmares. What lingers today isn't just the chilling connection between Vlad and Dracula, but the way symbols shift meaning across centuries. The Order of the Dragon's legacy reminds us that the past is never truly dead. It just waits, coiled in the shadows, ready to be resurrected in forms its creators could never have imagined. Imagine a world where heaven wasn't some distant throne room in the sky, but present in every leaf, every stone, every breath. This was the radical vision of the Brotherhood of the Free Spirit, a loosely connected network of mystics who shook medieval Europe to its core. Unlike the secret societies lurking in castles or shadowy guilds, these were itinerant preachers, weavers, and beggars who claimed the divine lived not in church altars but in the pulse of their own hearts. Their creed was simple and terrifying to authorities. If God is everywhere, then no priest, no king, no law could stand above the inner light of the soul. Their beliefs spiraled far beyond conventional heresy. While the church preached sin and salvation, the free spirits whispered that all creation was already holy, that there was no hell, no judgment, only an eternal divine essence flowing through all things. To them, even the devil was just a twisted reflection of God, necessary as shadow is to light. Such ideas might have been tolerated as poetic musings if not for what followed, their outright rejection of feudal order. If everything was divine, they argued, then property was a lie, wealth was corruption, marriage a chain. They wandered barefoot through market squares, sharing food, clothes, even spouses, declaring that the free man is king of all creation. Unsurprisingly, both church and nobility branded them existential threats. A peasant who believed they were inherently divine wouldn't bow to lords or tithe to bishops. Their most infamous figure, Marguerite Porete, a Beguine turned mystic, was burned at the stake in 1310 for her book The Mirror of Simple Souls, which dared to suggest that the soul could merge so completely with God that conventional morality became irrelevant. Authorities twisted her words into proof of orgies and lawlessness, but her real crime was undermining the very idea of hierarchy. What made the free spirits so dangerous wasn't just their theology, it was their social fluidity. They had no central leader, no fixed text, just oral teachings that mutated with each traveler who carried them. A weaver in Cologne might inspire a cobbler in Strasbourg, who'd later whisper to a disgraced monk in Paris, creating a viral network of dissent no Inquisition could fully map. Even their name was slippery. Sometimes they were called the heresy of the free spirit, other times the brethren of the new age. Like smoke, they dispersed when pressed, only to coalesce elsewhere. Their legacy is a paradox. Officially, they were exterminated by the 15th century, their writings ashes, their followers scattered. Yet echoes of their pantheism resurfaced in Renaissance humanism, Enlightenment deism, even the transcendentalists of the 19th century. When modern anarchists speak of a world without rulers, or hippies chant that all you need is love, they unknowingly walk a path first cleared by these medieval radicals. The free spirits proved that the most subversive idea isn't rebellion, it's the quiet conviction that divinity belongs to everyone, and no earthly power can fence the sacred. In the dim glow of candlelit chapels across Europe, a sacred figure stands apart from the rest, her face darkened by time, or perhaps by design. The Black Madonnas, these enigmatic statues of the Virgin Mary with skin tones ranging from deep umber to weathered ebony, have puzzled pilgrims and scholars for centuries. To the faithful, they're simply miraculous images, their hue attributed to candle smoke or medieval pigments gone dark with age. But look closer, and a more intriguing story emerges, one that stretches back long before the cross ever cast its shadow over the continent. These aren't just discolored relics. Many were deliberately carved from dark wood or black stone, their materials chosen with intention. In places like Montserrat in Spain or Częstochowa in Poland, they became objects of fervent devotion, credited with healing the sick, making the blind see, even stopping invading armies in their tracks. But the miracles might not be the most fascinating part. The locations of these shrines often overlap with ancient sites dedicated to goddesses like Isis, Cybele, or Diana, deities worshipped in the very same spot centuries before Christianity arrived. The Madonna of Einsiedeln in Switzerland, for instance, stands where a temple to the Celtic mother goddess once drew pilgrims. It's as if the earth itself remembers where the sacred feminine was honored and simply gave her a new name. Then there are the legends that cling to these statues like incense smoke. Some are said to have been discovered in hollow oak trees like Our Lady of Hermits in Switzerland, echoing pagan traditions of tree oracles. Others were supposedly found by shepherds or knights, guided by mysterious lights, a trope straight out of pre-Christian folklore. The most telling clue might be in the rituals still performed at their shrines. In Chartres Cathedral, home to a revered Black Madonna called Notre Dame de Sous Terre, Our Lady Underground, visitors walk an ancient labyrinth pattern etched into the floor, a symbol found in Neolithic sites across Europe, long associated with feminine divinity and rebirth. What emerges is a pattern far older than the Church. These dark Madonnas seem to be Christianity's way of absorbing what it couldn't eradicate: the primal human need for a goddess who embodies both creation and destruction, light and shadow. Her dark skin may represent the fertile earth, the wisdom of the crone, or the unknowable mysteries of the divine feminine. Some scholars suggest she's a medieval echo of the Egyptian Isis, whose cult spread across the Roman Empire, holding her son Horus in a pose identical to Mary with Jesus. Others see her as the Christianized face of the Celtic sovereignty goddess, who often appeared as a dark, unyielding figure testing would-be kings. The Church's relationship with these figures has always been uneasy. While officially embracing them as Marian devotions, whispers of heresy have never been far away. In the Middle Ages, groups like the Cathars allegedly venerated a Black Virgin as part of their dualist beliefs, seeing her as a bridge between the material and spiritual worlds. Later, occultists would claim the statues held coded alchemical knowledge, their darkness symbolizing the prima materia, the formless base of all creation. Today, pilgrims still flock to these shrines, though few recognize the layers of history beneath their feet. The Black Madonnas endure as living palimpsests, their dark surfaces reflecting not just candlelight, but the unbroken thread of humanity's search for the divine feminine, a quest that no conquest, no inquisition could ever fully erase. Their survival is a testament to the power of symbols and to the stubborn persistence of mysteries that refuse to be whitewashed by time. While the Catholic Church hunted heretics and kings crushed rebellious orders, another strand of secret wisdom wound its way through the shadows of medieval Europe, preserved not in Latin manuscripts, but in Hebrew letters scratched onto parchment by candlelight. Jewish Kabbalistic circles operated under constant threat, their members gathering in cramped attic synagogues or moonlit olive groves to unravel mysteries older than Christendom itself. The crown jewel of their tradition was the Zohar, a sprawling mystical text claiming to reveal the hidden architecture of creation, how divine light fractured into the material world, and how human deeds could mend the cosmos. But studying such dangerous wisdom required more than intellectual curiosity. It demanded absolute secrecy. Imagine the scene in 13th century Spain, where Rabbi Moses de Leon penned the Zohar while pogroms raged outside Jewish quarters. His work claimed to be the lost teachings of a 2nd century sage, but its true origins may have been a brilliant deception, a way to shield radical ideas under the cloak of antiquity. Kabbalists developed an entire language of concealment, encoding their teachings in gematria, numerology, acrostics, and layers of symbolic imagery. A discussion about the biblical Song of Songs might secretly explore the union of divine masculine and feminine energies, while a parable about a king's palace could veil instructions for ascending through celestial realms. The risks were deadly real. In 1281, the Church burned 10 wagonloads of Jewish texts in Paris, a warning shot against heretical interpretations of Scripture. Yet Kabbalists adapted, disguising their gatherings as innocuous Torah study groups. Some fled to the Ottoman Empire, where Sultan Bayezid II welcomed Jewish refugees with a pragmatism that masked his own fascination with their secrets. Others vanished into the Italian countryside, their teachings surfacing generations later in the notebooks of Renaissance magi like Pico della Mirandola, who boldly declared that no science gives surer proof of Christ's divinity than magic and Kabbalah. What made these hidden study groups so revolutionary wasn't just their metaphysics, it was their democratization of divinity. Unlike the church's top-down hierarchy, Kabbalah taught that every Jew, from the poorest cobbler to the wealthiest merchant, could access the divine through prayer, ethical deeds, and mystical union. The Zohar's vision of the Sephirot, 10 emanations through which infinite light becomes finite reality, offered a cosmic roadmap for personal transformation. But this spiritual empowerment came at a price. In 1648, when the messianic movement of Sabbatai Zevi erupted across the Jewish world, his Kabbalistic claims of being God's anointed nearly led to catastrophe. After his forced conversion to Islam, entire communities were left shattered, proof of how easily esoteric fire could burn those who grasped it unprepared. Yet the tradition endured. Lurianic Kabbalah, born from the ashes of the Spanish expulsion, reimagined exile itself as a divine process, arguing that humanity's role was to gather the scattered sparks of holiness hidden even in persecution. These weren't just philosophical musings, they were survival tactics turning suffering into sacred work. By the 18th century, Hasidic masters would distill these complex teachings into folktales and melodies, ensuring that what began in secret study circles could thrive even in the shtetls of Eastern Europe. The Kabbalists' greatest trick, hiding their light so well that it could never be extinguished. The forests of Bohemia echoed with the rhythmic thud of axes biting into wood, the clang of hammers shaping metal not for plows or hearths, but for war machines unlike anything Europe had seen. The Taborites, a radical wing of the Hussite rebellion, weren't just challenging the Catholic Church. They were building a new world with their bare hands, one fortified wagon at a time. Named after their hilltop stronghold of Tabor, a biblical reference to the mountain of Christ's transfiguration, these warriors saw themselves as God's chosen army, cleansing the earth in preparation for the second coming. Their battle cry wasn't just for religious freedom, it was a thunderous declaration that the apocalypse was now. What set the Taborites apart was their terrifying innovation. The Wagenburg, a mobile fortress of armored wagons chained together into an unbreakable ring. Picture these wooden behemoths, each bristling with hooks, scythes, and loopholes for crossbowmen, rolling across the Bohemian countryside like a wall of doom. When enemy cavalry charged, the wagons would snap into formation, creating an instant citadel where peasant soldiers, many of them farmers just weeks before, could rain down hellfire with handguns and makeshift cannons. It was guerrilla warfare meets divine reckoning, turning the open field into a death trap for armored knights who'd spent lifetimes training for a very different kind of war. But their military genius was only half the story. The Taborites' true radicalism lay in their vision of society. In their camps, nobility was a relic of the damned. Priests held no special status, anyone could preach, even women. Property was shared, taxes abolished, and the Latin Mass replaced with hymns sung in Czech. Their leader, the fiery Jan Žižka, a one-eyed veteran who'd lost his other eye in battle, ruled not by birthright but by sheer force of will, proving that a blind man could see the future more clearly than kings. To the Taborites, the earth itself was sacred ground, and every furrow plowed by a free peasant was a strike against the Antichrist who they believed wore the crown of the Holy Roman Emperor. Their apocalyptic fervor reached its peak at the Battle of Vitkov Hill in 1420, where Žižka's outnumbered forces defended Prague against a crusading army sent to crush them. As imperial troops scaled the slopes, the Taborites hurled rocks, burning hay, and even beehives down upon them, turning the hillside into a scene from Revelation. Victory cemented their reputation as God's avengers, but it also exposed the fractures in their dream. The more moderate Hussites grew uneasy with the Taborites' extremism, their insistence that the end days justified purging not just the church but all social order. By the time Žižka died of plague in 1424, his last request, to have his skin stretched over a drumhead to lead his troops one final time, the movement was unraveling. The moderates struck a deal with the church, betraying their radical brethren. At the Battle of Lipany in 1434, former Hussite allies turned their guns on the Taborites, slaughtering thousands. Yet their legacy refused to die quietly. Their war wagons inspired military tactics for centuries, and their radical egalitarianism flickered back to life in the Protestant Reformation and even the communist experiments of later eras. The Taborites proved that when people believe heaven is within reach, they'll reshape the earth or die trying. The Bavarian Illuminati, founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, was a product of the Enlightenment, not the Middle Ages. This secret society of freethinkers and reformers aimed to combat superstition and clerical influence through reason, not medieval mysticism. Yet somewhere along the way, their story got tangled in a web of older legends, morphing into the very kind of myth they sought to dismantle. How did an 18th century intellectual club become conflated with shadowy medieval conspiracies? The answer lies in humanity's timeless love affair with secret masters pulling history's strings. Weishaupt's Illuminati had more in common with Voltaire than with the Templars or Rosicrucians. Their ranks included progressive nobles, professors, and civil servants who met to discuss secular governance, not alchemy or arcane rituals. Their secrets were often just Enlightenment ideals too radical to voice openly, like meritocracy over birthright or education free from church dogma. But after their suppression in 1785, something peculiar happened. Their enemies, particularly conservative clerics, began stitching the Illuminati's name onto older fears. Pamphlets accused them of resurrecting ancient heresies, infiltrating governments, even orchestrating the French Revolution. The irony, a group founded to expose conspiracy theories became the star of its own. The medieval connection was pure theater, borrowed tropes repurposed for a new era. Take the all-seeing eye symbol, later associated with the Illuminati. Its roots stretch back to Renaissance occultism and even Egyptian iconography, but by the 19th century, it was retrofitted onto Weishaupt's order as proof of their timeless reach. Similarly, the idea of an unbroken lineage from the Templars to the Illuminati was cobbled together by conspiracy theorists despite zero historical evidence. The medieval secret societies provided a ready-made template, the initiation rites, the coded symbols, the whispers of world domination. The Illuminati didn't need these elements to function, but legends thrive on familiar patterns. Even their name played into the illusion. Illuminati harked back to the Spanish Alumbrados, a 16th century mystic sect accused of heresy, and before them, the Gnostic idea of inner illumination. Weishaupt likely chose it for its metaphorical punch, not to claim literal descent, but in the public imagination, the label became a bridge across centuries, tying modern radicals to ancient heretics. By the time 19th century, writers like Abbé Barruel wove the Illuminati into grand conspiracy tapestries, the medieval veneer was complete. The group's real mission, to promote critical thinking, got buried under layers of myth. Today, the Illuminati's pop culture persona, shadowy figures in hoods, manipulating wars and economies, says more about us than about history. We project medieval anxieties onto modern uncertainties, dressing contemporary fears in Gothic garb. The truth, secret societies rarely wield the power we ascribe to them. But the idea that someone, somewhere, holds the keys to the universe, that's a story as old as the first whispered initiation rite in a torchlit crypt. The Illuminati's greatest legacy isn't their influence, it's how thoroughly they proved that even societies founded to dispel myths can't escape becoming one. The crackling of parchment under a monk's quill, the frantic scribbles of an inquisitor's notes, these are the fragments left behind from Europe's witch trials, where reality and nightmare blurred beyond recognition. On one side stood whispered traditions of village healers, their remedies passed down through generations. On the other, the church's fevered visions of broomstick-riding hags feasting on infants at moonlit Sabbaths. But between these extremes lies a truth far more complex than pure fantasy or pagan survival. Take the trial of Walpurga horsemen in 16th century Bavaria. Under torture, the midwife confessed to flying to a mountain gathering where the devil presided over a feast of stolen children. Yet buried in her testimony are eerie details that don't fit the church's template. Salves made from spring herbs gathered when Venus is high, a phrase echoing pre-Christian folk medicine. Her accusers heard Satanism. Historians hear possible fragments of old fertility rites distorted through the lens of persecution. This duality ripples through trial records across Europe. In the Pyrenees, accused witches spoke of the White Goddess, who led their dances, a figure suspiciously resembling the local deity Mary, worshipped long before Christianity's arrival. But not all witchcraft was pagan survival. Many so-called spells were simply medieval medicine, like the flying ointments containing hallucinogenic belladonna and henbane. Rubbed on the skin, these could induce vivid trances, explaining wild flight confessions without literal brooms, nor were all accused witches benevolent healers. Some wielded genuine malice, like the Scottish cunning women who specialized in elf-shot curses to wither crops or livestock. The line between folk magic and malevolence was often as thin as a knife's edge. The real tragedy: most trial records can't be taken at face value. Inquisitors worked from scripts like the Malleus Maleficarum, a 15th century witch hunting manual that prescribed leading questions and listed proofs of guilt, from unusual birthmarks to the ability to weep on command. Confessions followed predictable arcs because interrogators demanded them, not because they reflected actual gatherings. Yet even through this filter, glimmers of something older sometimes slipped through. In Sicily, accused witches described the game of the good ladies, a nocturnal ride with fairy-like beings bearing cups of wine, strikingly similar to Roman accounts of Diana's nocturnal processions. Perhaps the deepest irony is that the Church's obsession with satanic covens may have created what it feared. Persecution forced scattered folk practitioners into tighter networks for protection, inadvertently shaping the very secret societies inquisitors imagined. By the 17th century, some witch trials describe elaborate hierarchies with queens and initiates are structures more likely born from panic than pagan tradition. The witch hunts didn't just suppress old beliefs, they rewrote them in fire and blood, leaving a history where truth and terror are forever entwined. What remains isn't a clear divide between fact and fiction, but a haunting palimpsest where every confession holds layers of fear, survival, and the human need to explain the unknown, no matter the cost. In 1956, a storm of excitement swept through the French town of Rennes-le-Château when a local priest allegedly discovered ancient parchments hidden inside a hollow altar pillar. These documents, filled with cryptic symbols and coded messages, supposedly revealed a bombshell secret that the Priory of Sion, a shadowy medieval order, had spent centuries protecting the sacred bloodline of Jesus Christ and Mary Magdalene. The story had everything: hidden treasure, forbidden love, and a conspiracy stretching back to the crucifixion. There was just one problem: it was all a brilliantly orchestrated hoax. The mastermind behind this modern myth was Pierre Plantard, a French eccentric with a flair for the dramatic. In the mid-20th century, he and a small circle of collaborators fabricated elaborate historical documents, including fake genealogies linking himself to the lost Merovingian kings of France, alleged descendants of Christ. Plantard's genius wasn't invention, but repackaging. He took scraps of Templar lore, Gnostic symbolism, and local Rennes-le-Château legends, weaving them into a story so seductive it still captivates conspiracy theorists today. The supposed Priory of Sion, far from being a real medieval order, was a 20th century fabrication, yet its myth latched onto older truths about how secret societies fuel our imaginations. What made the hoax so sticky? It tapped into a deep cultural vein, the idea that powerful truths are always hidden. Medieval Grail romances like Wolfram von Eschenbach's Parzival had already spun tales of secretive knights guarding Christ's relics. Plantard simply updated the script, swapping chalices for bloodlines. Even the name Priory of Sion was borrowed. An actual medieval monastic community on Mount Zion had disbanded centuries earlier, leaving just enough historical dust to make the lie sparkle. The real irony, while the Priory of Sion was fake, its fantasy outlived its creators. When the Holy Blood and the Holy Grail hit shelves in 1982, followed decades later by the Da Vinci Code, Plantard's tall tale became global obsession. Tourists still flock to Rennes-le-Château, hoping to decode the fake ciphers left behind. The story's endurance reveals an uncomfortable truth: we crave secret histories more than verified ones. It's more thrilling to imagine shadowy orders pulling strings than to accept history's messy, unscripted reality. Yet buried beneath the hoax lies a genuine mystery. Why do these tropes resonate so deeply? Perhaps because they let us rewrite history as a grand treasure hunt, where every symbol holds meaning and every conspiracy confirms our suspicion that the world isn't what it seems. The Priory of Sion may have been fiction, but its power to captivate, that's as real as the medieval parchments it pretended to be. Beneath the cobbled streets of medieval Lyon, where merchants hawked their wares and church bells marked the hours, an invisible network pulsed with whispered prayers. The Waldensians, a sect of working-class Christians who dared to read the Bible in their own language. While bishops lectured from gilded pulpits, these poor of Lyon gathered in cellars and barns, passing handwritten scriptures from calloused hand to calloused hand. Their crime, believing that faith shouldn't require a priest's Latin tongue to reach God's ears. By the 12th century, this radical idea had made them targets, forcing their devotion underground, sometimes literally. The Waldensians mastered the art of evasion long before it had a name. In the Alpine valleys straddling France and Italy, they carved secret chambers beneath flour mills, their grinding stones masking the sound of forbidden sermons. Traveling preachers disguised as peddlers used coded phrases to identify safe houses. A request for good wool might signal a sympathetic host, while complaints about bitter wine warned of informants nearby. Their greatest innovation, a shadow postal system of shepherds and weavers who could smuggle letters across borders in loom shuttles or hollowed-out staffs, turning the textile trade into an information superhighway. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, the Lollards were perfecting their own brand of clandestine resistance. Followers of the controversial Oxford theologian John Wycliffe, these reformers believed the church had strayed from Christ's teachings, and they weren't afraid to say so. But when speaking aloud became deadly, they turned to subterfuge. In the attics of London's merchant houses, scribes produced tiny, concealable Bible translations no larger than a palm, their pages crammed with minute script. Some were even stitched into the linings of cloaks, turning every faithful Lollard into a walking library. The Lollards' most audacious hideouts weren't in the countryside, but beneath the noses of authorities. Norwich's labyrinthine tunnels, originally built for medieval drainage, became clandestine meeting halls where initiates entered as Catholics and left as heretics. A mason might tap 3 times on a tavern's keg to gain entry to a backroom where scripture was read by candlelight, always with a bucket of water ready to douse the flames at the first sign of raid. Their greatest protection was anonymity. Unlike robed monks, these were bakers, blacksmiths, and housewives who blended seamlessly into the rhythms of daily life. What united these two movements wasn't just their defiance, but their grassroots ingenuity. Where the Templars had castles and the Rosicrucians had manifestos, the Waldensians and Lollards had something more potent: the trust of ordinary people. A Waldensian midwife delivering a baby could quietly share psalms with new mothers. A Lollard schoolteacher might slip vernacular Bible verses between Latin grammar lessons. Their networks thrived not through grand designs, but through thousands of tiny, unremarkable acts of courage. a loaf of bread left on a windowsill, a door left unbarred at midnight, a silent nod across a crowded market. Persecution only sharpened their creativity. When Waldensians fled to the Piedmont valleys, they developed a system of mirror signals flashed between mountain peaks, relaying warnings faster than horsemen could ride. Lollards in Bristol allegedly used the tide schedules of the River Avon to coordinate meetings, their rowboats vanishing into fog before pursuers could follow. Both groups left behind cryptic carvings, crosses hidden in vine motifs on furniture, Bible verses etched into the undersides of tavern tables, messages meant to outlast their makers. The tragedy is that so much of their history remains fragmentary, reconstructed from trial records where confessions were torn from tortured lips. We know of a Waldensian woman in Strasbourg who memorized entire Gospels to recite while spinning thread, her words lost to time but her spindle whorl found centuries later in an archaeological dig. Or the Lollard carpenter in Leicester who hollowed out his workbench to conceal forbidden texts, only for it to be discovered during a random inspection. These weren't just heretics, they were everyday people who gambled everything for a chance to touch the divine without intermediaries. Their legacy lingers in unexpected places. The Waldensian practice of Bible memorization inspired later Protestant groups like the Huguenots, while Lollard ideas resurfaced forcefully during the English Reformation. Perhaps their most enduring lesson is how effortlessly belief can slip through the fingers of power, how a whispered psalm in a dark cellar can shake empires more than any army. The tunnels may have crumbled and the codes been forgotten, but the impulse they represented never truly vanished. It just learned new ways to hide. In the hushed scriptoriums of medieval Europe, where monks copied scripture by lamplight, another kind of scribe was at work. One who wrote not in plain Latin, but in a language of swirling symbols and riddles that would baffle the uninitiated. These were the alchemists, the era's rogue scientists, threading dangerous knowledge through the eye of censorship with manuscripts designed to deceive. To the untrained eye, their texts appeared as mere fanciful illustrations, kings and queens embracing in bubbling flasks, serpents devouring their own tails, suns and moons locked in celestial dance. But to those who knew how to read between the lines, these images were a roadmap to transformation both of base metals and of the human soul. Take the Rosarium Philosophorum, a 15th century alchemical treatise filled with cryptic woodcuts. One depicts a queen submerged in a flask of liquid, her crown floating above her head, a seemingly nonsensical scene until you grasp the code. The queen represents silver, the flask the alchemical vessel, and the crown the purified essence of the metal. But the symbolism runs deeper. For initiates, this wasn't just about chemistry. It was a metaphor for the dissolution of the ego, the surrender required for spiritual rebirth. The church might condemn such ideas as heresy, but how could they prosecute a drawing of a woman in a bottle? Alchemists didn't just hide their secrets in images, they weaponized ambiguity. The legendary Emerald Tablet of Hermes, a cornerstone of their tradition, packed universe-altering concepts into just 14 lines of near incomprehensible prose. That which is above is like to that which is below. It declared, a phrase that could be dismissed as mystical babble by outsiders but signaled the principle of cosmic correspondence to initiates. Even their lab notes were linguistic mazes. A recipe for the green lion devouring the sun might describe a real chemical reaction involving antimony and gold, but only if you knew that green lion referred to a specific acidic compound. The risks of exposure were brutal. Spanish alchemist Arnaldus de Villanova narrowly escaped the Inquisition by claiming his work was merely allegorical, while others weren't so lucky. In response, some adopted an even cleverer tactic, hiding in plain sight. Basil Valentine, a possibly fictional Benedictine monk, embedded his formulas in pious-sounding religious tracts describing chemical processes as spiritual parables. A passage about the purification of the sinful soul might detail the distillation of mercury, complete with coded temperatures and timings. To church censors, it read like orthodox theology. To alchemists, it was a lab manual. The most ingenious alchemical texts were those that served dual purposes. The Splendor Solis, a lavishly illuminated 16th century manuscript, looks at first glance like a nobleman's vanity project, all gold leaf and biblical motifs. But nestled among the pretty pictures are precise instructions for creating the philosopher's stone, disguised as allegorical journeys. A knight fighting a dragon isn't just a chivalric trope. It's a coded depiction of the chemical reaction between sulfur and mercury, the foundational elements of alchemy. Even the colors held meaning. The vivid greens and reds weren't just decorative, they corresponded to specific stages of the great work, the alchemist's lifelong quest for transmutation. What made these brotherhoods so resilient wasn't just their ciphers, but their decentralized nature. Unlike the Templars with their fortresses, alchemists often worked alone or in small, mobile circles. A barber surgeon in Prague might correspond with a Franciscan friar in Florence using shared symbolism, their letters slipping past church scrutiny as harmless eccentricity. When one was arrested, the rest could vanish into new identities, their knowledge preserved in symbols painted on chapel ceilings or carved into the margins of entirely unrelated books. By the time the Renaissance dawned, these scattered threads would weave into the foundations of modern chemistry, proving that sometimes the best way to preserve truth is to dress it in a fool's costume. The village of Woolpit in Suffolk lay blanketed in late summer wheat when the harvesters made their find two children, a boy and a girl, huddled at the edge of a wolf pit, their skin tinged an unnatural shade of green. According to 12th century chronicles, they spoke no known language, recoiled from all food but raw beans, and wore garments of strange coloration. The boy sickened and died within months, but the girl survived, eventually learning English and telling a bizarre story. She and her brother came from a twilight realm called St. Martin's Land, where the sun never rose and the people lived in perpetual gloom. Historians have long dismissed the tale as folklore, perhaps a garbled account of Flemish immigrants whose foreign tongue and pale complexions might seem alien to English villagers. But what if the green children were more than just a curious anecdote? What if their story was a carefully constructed smokescreen, hiding something far darker beneath its fairy tale surface? Consider the timing. The mid-12th century was a period of brutal suppression for England's remaining pagan holdouts. Saxon traditions clung to life in remote villages, and whispers of the old ways still echoed in forest clearings. At the same time, the church was tightening its grip, rooting out heresy with increasing fervor. Could the green children have been refugees from one of these persecuted groups, their green skin the result of woad dye used in pagan rituals, their strange garments woven with symbolic patterns meant to ward off evil? The girl's description of a sunless land might then be code for a hidden enclave, perhaps in the dense fenlands of East Anglia, where communities could vanish into the marshes like mist. There's another, grimmer possibility. Medieval England was crisscrossed by networks of child traffickers who supplied servants, laborers, and worse to noble houses under the guise of charity. The wolf pit where the children were found wasn't just a random location. These pits were often landmarks, meeting points for illicit exchanges, the green tinge. Malnutrition or even arsenic poisoning from forced labor in mines, where toxic minerals could leach into the skin. The girl's survival might owe less to divine providence than to a local lord's decision to keep her as a curiosity. Her story carefully reshaped to amuse guests rather than reveal uncomfortable truths. The most compelling clue lies in the name of their supposed homeland, St. Martin's Land. St. Martin of Tours was the patron saint of beggars and outcasts, but also a figure associated with pre-Christian harvest rituals. In some regions, Martinmas marked the start of winter, a time when doors were left unlocked for wandering spirits. Was this a veiled reference to a secret network, a land not of perpetual twilight but of hidden safe houses where the hunted could disappear at the year's darkest hour? By the time the Green Girl, as she came to be known, married a local man and faded into history, her tale had already taken on a life of its own. Chroniclers polished it into a moral fable about Christian salvation, while peasants likely whispered darker versions by firelight. The truth, if it still exists, is buried beneath layers of medieval spin, but the legend's endurance hints at something deeper, not just an oddity but a scar. Whether the children were pagan refugees, trafficking victims, or something else entirely, their story refused to vanish, just like the secrets medieval societies worked so hard to keep. Beneath the glittering pageantry of medieval courts, where knights pledged loyalty to king and Christ in grand ceremonies, another layer of brotherhood thrived, one veiled in whispered oaths and guarded rituals. The Order of the Garter, founded by England's Edward III in 1348, presented itself as the pinnacle of chivalric virtue, its members swearing public vows to uphold justice and piety. Yet behind closed doors, initiates underwent secret rites steeped in Arthurian mysticism, their blue velvet cloaks symbolizing not just nobility, but access to esoteric circles where power was brokered in hushed tones. The golden buckle of the garter itself, worn just below the knee, hid a coded meaning, a reminder that true allegiance bound tighter than any visible chain. Across the Channel, the Order of the Golden Fleece wove an even thicker tapestry of duality. Established in 1430 by Philip the Good of Burgundy, its public face celebrated martial prowess and Christian devotion, with members like Charles the Bold leading armies under the fleece's glittering emblem. But the order's inner workings operated like a secular priesthood. Initiates submitted to a clandestine examination of their lineage and loyalties, their acceptance sealed by a private ritual where the fleece, a nod to Jason's legendary quest, symbolized the pursuit of hidden knowledge. The Order's statutes, written in cipher like Latin, contained clauses known only to members, including a startling provision. Should their duke violate their privileges, they were sworn to collective disobedience. This wasn't just knighthood, it was a sovereign state within a state. The tension between public image and private truth reached its peak in initiation ceremonies. While crowds gathered to watch processions of armored knights, the real transformation happened in candlelit chapels, where candidates underwent symbolic deaths and rebirths. In the Order of the Dragon, inductees entered a purpose-built chamber draped in black, emerging hours later with a serpentine medallion that marked them as reborn defenders of Christendom. These rites borrowed heavily from older mystery traditions, echoes of Mithraic lion, headed gods and Eleusinian grain symbolism repurposed to bond elites across fractious kingdoms. What set these orders apart from true secret societies wasn't their secrecy, but its limits. Their existence was common knowledge. Their power lay in controlling what the public couldn't see. When Maximilian I of Habsburg inducted new members into the Golden Fleece, spectators saw splendid robes and heard uplifting speeches. What they didn't witness were the geomantic charts consulted beforehand to ensure astrological alignment, or the alchemical symbols etched into the ceremonial goblets used for the post-ritual feast. The orders walked a razor's edge, just transparent enough to awe outsiders, just opaque enough to sustain their mystique. The most telling detail, their artifacts often held dual meanings. The Garter's motto, Honi soit qui mal vi pens, shame on him who thinks evil of it, publicly referred to courtly virtue. Insiders knew it also warned against probing too deeply into their political machinations. Similarly, the Golden Fleece's fire steel emblem, resembling a letter B for Burgundy, secretly invoked the Greek beta, a marker of second birth in Hermetic tradition. These weren't just decorations, they were dog whistles for the initiated, a language of power hiding in the trappings of honor. By the Renaissance, these orders had become blueprints for later secret societies, proving that the most effective way to wield influence wasn't through brute force, but through the careful cultivation of mystery. The true lesson of their legacy, that in the medieval world the finest armor wasn't made of steel. It was woven from symbols, rituals, and the unshakable belief that some truths lose their power when spoken aloud. In the bustling trade quarters of medieval cities, where the clang of hammers and the scent of molten metal filled the air, the guild houses stood as fortresses of knowledge, not just centers of commerce, but vaults of closely guarded secrets. Take the stained glass artisans of Chartres, whose radiant blues and crimsons seemed to capture sunlight itself. The formula for that legendary Chartres blue wasn't written in any ledger. It was memorized, passed from master to apprentice in whispered rituals, the exact mixture of cobalt and potash ash guarded like the crown jewels. To reveal it to an outsider wasn't just betrayal, it was sacrilege, punishable by expulsion or worse. Masons operated under even stricter bonds. The geometric secrets behind constructing soaring cathedrals, how to calculate load-bearing arches or align pillars to celestial patterns were protected by layers of symbolism. A master might teach his apprentice the 5 points of fellowship, a series of handgrips and passwords confirming one's rank, before entrusting him with the sacred measurements encoded in the Mason's mark, carved discreetly into stone. These weren't mere signatures, they were cryptographic badges declaring which craftsman had earned the right to work on the holiest sections of the building. Legends persist that some cathedral layouts conceal esoteric designs, star maps, or alchemical symbols visible only to those who knew where to look. The guild's obsession with secrecy went beyond practical competition. Their initiation ceremonies echoed ancient mystery rites, blending Christian piety with older traditions. A young dyer in Florence might be blindfolded and led through a labyrinthine cellar before swearing his oath over a vat of indigo, symbolizing the journey from ignorance to mastery. Textile weavers in Bruges incorporated coded patterns into their fabrics. A floral motif might denote membership in a particular brotherhood, while a zigzag border signaled allegiance to a rebellious faction. These weren't just decorative flourishes, they were survival tactics in an era when skilled laborers could be poached, kidnapped, or accused of witchcraft for knowing too much. Perhaps the most intriguing survival of these guild secrets lies in their unintended legacy. When the Black Death decimated Europe's master craftsmen, surviving apprentices became accidental guardians of vanishing techniques. In response, some guilds began encrypting their knowledge in plain sight, architectural flourishes that doubled as instructional diagrams or recipe books written in allegorical verse. The famous Mappi Clavicula, a 9th century manual on glassmaking and metalwork, reads like a mystic's journal, its instructions veiled in phrases like "marry the red lion to the white eagle," a reference to combining gold and silver alloys. Only those trained in the lexicon could decode its true meaning. This culture of concealment didn't just preserve trade skills, it shaped the DNA of later secret societies. Freemasons would adopt the stonemason's symbolic tools and graded initiations, while Renaissance alchemists borrowed the guild's habit of hiding transformative knowledge behind allegory. Even today, the idea of trade secrets carries an echo of those medieval oaths, a reminder that some knowledge has always been too powerful or too precious to trust to parchment alone. The guilds understood something modern society often forgets, that true mastery isn't just about what you make, but what you choose to keep hidden. The silk merchant bowed deeply as he unrolled a bolt of Venetian brocade, its gleaming threads concealing more than just craftsmanship. Folded between the layers lay a coded letter, its invisible ink only revealing secrets when held over flame. This wasn't just commerce, it was the lifeblood of medieval espionage, where royal agents moved like ghosts through the bustling markets and cloistered monasteries of Europe. Long before Elizabeth I's famed spymaster Walsingham wove his web of informants, Her ancestors had already mastered the art of turning everyday institutions into covert intelligence hubs. Take the Hanseatic League, that mighty alliance of North German merchants. Their ships crisscrossed the Baltic, carrying not just timber and furs, but whispers of political unrest gleaned from dockside taverns. King Edward III of England, Elizabeth's great-great-grandfather, exploited this perfectly. He granted Hanse traders special privileges in London's Steelyard district, not out of generosity, but because their warehouses made perfect dead-drop locations. A barrel of Rhenish wine might contain a compartment holding maps of French coastal defenses, while a crate of Flemish wool hid deciphered enemy correspondence. The merchants themselves often remained blissfully unaware, their guild transformed into an unwitting postal service for crown secrets, but the real masters of holy subterfuge were the mendicant orders, friars whose vows of poverty and itinerant lifestyles made them ideal spies. Franciscans and Dominicans, with their right to cross borders freely under papal protection, became couriers for sensitive information. A monk's habit concealed more than humility. Its deep sleeves could stash stolen treaties or sketches of fortifications. Chroniclers noted how Edward I employed certain Grey brothers to infiltrate Welsh strongholds before his invasions, their religious garb allowing them to move unchallenged through enemy camps. These clerical agents didn't just gather intelligence, they manipulated it. A well-placed confession from a repentant friar could spread disinformation, turning ally against ally with carefully crafted rumors of betrayal. The Plantagenets elevated this shadow war to an art form. Richard the Lionheart's network of assassin informants in the Holy Land, likely inspired by his encounters with the Hashishin, evolved into a sophisticated domestic operation under later kings. Royal clerks maintained cipher keys disguised as psalm books, while minstrels traveling between castles carried encrypted messages in their song lyrics. Even the humble pilgrim's badge served dual purposes. Those returning from Santiago de Compostela often bore scallop shells with faint etchings detailing troop movements along the French frontier. What made these systems so formidable was their deniability. When a wool merchant was caught with suspicious documents in Calais, the English crown could feign outrage at such unauthorized actions. Monasteries caught passing intelligence simply blamed rogue brethren. This layered deception reached its peak during the 100 Years' War, when entire nunneries near Bordeaux operated as relay stations for military dispatches. The abbesses, often from noble families, used their scriptorium's reputation for sacred texts to mask the production of detailed terrain maps for English commanders. The echoes of these medieval networks still resonate in modern intelligence trade, craft dead drops, plausible deniability, the use of non-official cover. But where today's spies rely on technology, their medieval counterparts harnessed something far more potent: the unshakable medieval faith in the invisibility of holy orders and the neutrality of commerce. It was a reminder that the best secrets aren't those locked away in vaults, but those hidden in the everyone's plain sight, woven into the fabric of daily life until they became indistinguishable from the mundane. The ink had barely dried on the last medieval grimoires when a new dawn broke over Europe: the Renaissance, that explosive rebirth of art, science, and human curiosity. But beneath the marble busts and luminous frescoes, the old secrets refused to die. They simply found new patrons, whispering through the workshops of Florence and the salons of Paris like a half-remembered song. Consider Leonardo da Vinci, that quintessential Renaissance man, sketching flying machines by day and filling his notebooks backwards with mirrored script by candlelight. Was this just eccentricity or the careful habit of someone who'd learned from the alchemist's playbook? His designs for submarine war machines and portable bridges weren't just brilliant. They were dangerous knowledge, the kind that might earn you a midnight visit from the wrong sort of authorities. The bridge between these eras wasn't just intellectual, it was literal. When Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453, Byzantine scholars fleeing the crumbling empire didn't arrive empty-handed. They carried precious cargo, ancient Greek texts on mathematics and philosophy, yes, but also hermetic manuscripts painstakingly copied by medieval monks. Suddenly, Europe's humanist scholars had access to ideas that had been circulating in secret for centuries: Neoplatonic mysticism, alchemical treatises, even fragments of Gnostic Gospels. Marsilio Ficino, the Medici family's house philosopher, didn't just translate Plato. He ran an informal academy where initiates pored over texts that would have gotten them burned a century earlier. This underground river of esoteric thought didn't just feed lone geniuses, it nourished entire movements. The Rosicrucian furor of the early 1600s, with its cryptic manifestos and promises of an invisible college of enlightened adepts, was essentially medieval Gnosticism dressed in Renaissance tailoring. When the controversial physician Paracelsus claimed disease could be cured by celestial harmonies and alchemical elixirs, he was channeling the same blend of science and mysticism that had kept medieval herbalists one step ahead of the Inquisition. Even the telescope, that emblem of the new empirical age, had precursors in the seeing stones described in obscure Arabic optical texts that had been passed hand to hand through Jewish and Muslim scholarly networks during the darkest days of the Crusades. Perhaps the most telling survival was in the secret societies themselves. The Freemasons, those architects of the Enlightenment, didn't spring fully formed from London coffee houses. Their graded initiations and symbolic tools were direct descendants of the stonemason guild's guarded knowledge. The difference, where a medieval mason might have sworn never to reveal the secret proportions of a cathedral's buttresses, his 18th century counterpart pledged allegiance to ideals of liberty and equality that were equally dangerous to the powers of his day. The tools hadn't changed, the square still represented morality, the compass human reason, but the stakes had become existential. This hidden continuity explains why the Renaissance wasn't the clean break we often imagine. When Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake in 1600 for heresy, his crimes included belief in an infinite universe, an idea straight out of the condemned Cathar and free spirit texts of the Middle Ages. The same church that had crushed the Waldensians now found itself battling Copernican astronomers and pantheist poets, all heirs to traditions it thought it had erased. Even the Reformation, with its rejection of papal authority, echoed the Lollard and Hussite cries for vernacular scripture and direct spiritual experience. What emerged by the 17th century was a paradox. The Enlightenment's age of reason was deeply indebted to the medieval world's underground streams of forbidden knowledge. The Royal Society, that bastion of scientific progress, counted among its early members men like Elias Ashmole, an avid alchemist who studied John Dee's encrypted angelic conversations. The new science of Bacon and Newton didn't reject secret societies. It coexisted with them, often uncomfortably. Newton spent more time decoding biblical prophecy and chasing the philosopher's stone than he did formulating the laws of motion, seeing no contradiction between the two pursuits. The ultimate testament to these ideas' endurance lies in their geographical spread. Just as medieval Jewish Kabbalists had fled persecution by hopping from Spain to Italy to Ottoman lands, Renaissance heretics and freethinkers turned the whole Atlantic into their escape route. Quakers with Cathar-like views on inner light sailed for Pennsylvania, Rosicrucian-leaning alchemists followed the Portuguese to Brazil, and Masonic lodges sprouted from Boston to Calcutta. The medieval secret societies had been localized, their power limited by how far a messenger could ride. Their Renaissance successors became global almost overnight, their ideas carried on the same ships that brought tea and tobacco. The game hadn't changed, only the board had grown larger and the players more daring. History isn't just written by the victors, it's whispered by the secret keepers, the oath-bound and the defiant. The societies we've explored weren't mere footnotes, they were living currents beneath the surface of kings and crusades, shaping the world in ways textbooks often overlook. The Templars' financial innovations laid the groundwork for modern banking, while the Cathar's radical equality foreshadowed Enlightenment ideals. The Kabbalists' coded wisdom preserved knowledge through persecution, and the Beguines proved that spirituality could flourish outside institutional walls. These weren't just rebels or mystics, they were architects of alternatives, proving that power isn't always wielded from a throne. Sometimes it's hidden in the turn of a weaver's loom, the flash of an alchemist's flask, or the quiet defiance of a prayer spoken in one's mother tongue. Today, echoes of these medieval enigmas linger in plain sight. Freemasons still trace their rituals to stonemason guilds. Conspiracy theories about shadowy elites borrow the Templars' aura of secrecy. Even online communities, with their encrypted chats and invitation-only forums, mirror the clandestine networks of Waldensians and Lollards. The real question isn't whether secret societies still exist, it's which modern movements, corporations, or subcultures might one day be seen as the Rosicrucians or Hashashin of our era. Are today's tech visionaries the new alchemists chasing digital philosophers' stones? Do underground activist networks carry the torch of the free spirits' rebellion? History has a habit of repeating itself, but never exactly. The lesson of these medieval groups isn't to hunt for hidden masters or decode every symbol. It's to recognize that the official story is always incomplete. Behind every grand narrative, there are whispers. Beneath every dominant power, there are counter-currents. And perhaps in questioning what we're told, we honor the spirit of those who dared to imagine a different world. Now we turn the page to you. Which of these societies fascinates you most? Do you think their legacy lives on in ways we haven't uncovered? Drop your thoughts in the comments along with your favorite historical conspiracy, and let's keep the conversation alive. If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. The past is full of secrets waiting to be rediscovered, and together we'll keep unraveling them one thread at a time.